Hello, and welcome to what should be episode 2 of the Sword of the Stars Guide to New Players. So, we're going to start with how to load a game. As you remember, we saved last time, and here we have our save game. So, funny thing that happened is my copy of Steam started acting up and I had to reinstall it, which unfortunately deleted all of my profiles and such for Sword of the Stars. So I've tried to recreate the game state from the previous video as best as I've been able to. There will be some discrepancies, such as the exact shape of the galaxy and our starting position and our homeworld's name. So hopefully you'll forgive me. Shouldn't really affect things because we were only on turn 2. So here's the thing. When you load a game of Sword of the Stars, you actually get to see information about the other players, even if you haven't met them. So you can sort of, cheat a little bit. We knew that they were humans because we set them that way, but now we also know what their icon is and whatnot, and if we had set them to random, well, we wouldn't have known, and now we do. Anyway, let's get back to the game. So here we are. This little thing always pops up. And as you can see, the map is a little different. Our homeworld has a slightly different name. It is apparently still turn 1. I guess I forgot to actually move on to turn 2, but we're still researching Waldo units. 7 turns. Right, because our savings are ever so slightly worse. Come on. Let's get us back to 5 turns. There we go. So, we should still, yes, we have 3 tankers building. On to turn 2. And here we go. We have our 3 tankers, we will split them, and as you can see, we have 3 turns left to go. How did we go from 5 turns to 3? Well, because now we no longer have any negative income from our being in debt, which boosts our effective projected treasury, which is where the estimate comes from. Anyway, we now have these ships, which we can send out. Oh, accidentally had them all selected. Now, I'm going to go into, I think, a little more on how exactly research works. Every single technology in Sword of the Stars has an unseen number of research points required for it to be finished. Well, not quite finished, as we'll learn, but close enough. As we discussed earlier, the amount of funding you put in to research, based on your savings research bar, that'll determine how much of your money goes into research. Each of the species has a different conversion rate of money in to research points out. The Lear are the best at research, and so get more research points per given amount of money. For instance, and this is just me pulling numbers out of thin air, if they invested 100,000 into research, they might get 50 research points out of that, while another species might get only 40. Again, these aren't the exact numbers. I would suggest consulting the Sword of the Stars Wikipedia article on research. There's a lot more information there. Anyway, so your economy directly affects how fast you can research things, because the more money you have, the more money you can potentially put into research, the more research points you can get per turn, and the faster a technology will unlock. Although you can never have more than 1 per turn. Let me think. Yes. So, the thing is, though, is that a technology doesn't automatically unlock at 100%. Instead, between 50% and 150% of the amount of research points required each turn the game checks randomly, basically randomly generates a number between 1 and 100. And if that number is equal to the percentage that you have unlocked towards that research up to that point, minus 50, then the technology is given to you. If it's not, it continues next turn. This means that you can potentially get a technology when it's only 51% of the way done. Conversely, it can take until it's 150% over budget. If it ever reaches 150%, it will immediately unlock, and it can't potentially go on infinity. So you don't have to worry about that, but it can get frustrating if early game researches do take a couple extra turns more than they should, especially if it happens a few times in a row, because, early on, that's a really big deal. Anyway, enough about that. We've got our ships, we've got our income, and so, as I noted last time, explorers cost significantly less than tankers, which means that early on they can also be very good for exploration, although they will have an effectively shorter range. So what I'm going to do is build a few of those to use. This is very inefficient because if I was going to do that, I should have made those my first wave to explore the nearest planets, and my tankers be the second wave since they have longer range. But this is a learning experience for all of us, I guess. Mostly you, though. That's why you're here, right? This is video for new players, so yeah. Although honestly, there's a lot in this game that isn't super well explained, so even if you're pretty well versed in it, you might still find some interesting stuff. So here we can see our extended ranges, and we can see that they actually don't even have the range to get to, yeah. So this is why I would prefer tankers. So these guys here are basically just going to sit. Extended ranges also have more. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah. They have more armor, and they have more weapons than tankers, which means that if you maybe find something not so friendly at your destination, they have a better chance. But, they're still piddly little destroyers with small weapon mounts, and, well, don't hold your breath is all I'm going to say. So again, there's not really much we can do. You can see here we have 51% complete. Apparently we didn't roll a natural 1 on our random D100, so we did not get the research. Turn 4, here we come. You see, we actually got it. And if we click here, scientists made a breakthrough with the Waldo units. Research has completed ahead of schedule. So even though it was supposed to complete next turn, it actually completed here at presumably around 76%. So that's nice. And we can see here that it has unlocked orbital foundries, reflective coating, and Tarkasian living steel. And also, as we learned, industrial output is effectively build points that planets have. Ship construction cost is how much actual cash money, space bucks, a ship or other thing will cost. So Waldo units is very good by increasing the number of ships our planets can build a turn and decreasing how much they cost our wallet. When you've unlocked new technologies for the turn that you unlock them on, they have this little sparkly effect to make them stand out, which, when you're all the way out here, yeah, it helps. So here we can see this will increase your hull strength and actually lets them repair very slowly. Reflective coating, defense versus lasers, and our ship's saving cost increases. And the reason for this is because reflective coating is an add-on that we can give to ships that will, as it says, gives them a bonus defense against lasers, which is going to be more expensive, although Tarkasian living steel does not say that. And we have orbital foundries, more ship saving costs, and it would give us the strafe command section. But for now, we could do this. Cybernetic interface, 5% more efficiently, which I believe means that they would require 5% less less industrial output, and also increasing industrial output by 20%. I don't think this refers to savings costs because it doesn't say so. But again, the game can be opaque, and I'm not going to interrupt this video to go look it up on the wiki because I would much rather respect your time. And then here, population growth rate. So we're going to want to get this because if we're lucky, it's going to lead to stasis pods, which make colonizing much easier. Speaking of colonizing, let's build some colonizers. Colonizers, as you might guess, are used to colonize planets. So, those are what you use. We're going to wait until we see if we can get cryopods because they give us an add-on, which we would actually have to design a new ship for. And if we did that, then any existing colonizers would be obsolete. So, on to the next turn. Nothing happens. Let's see, 2 turns. Another thing, if we look, we can actually see the morale of a planet. We hover over this and we get the total population as well as the morale, 75. We click here, we get information. So far nothing's been affecting the morale. You get +1 morale to all your planets at certain imperial savings milestones. At 1 million in your bank account, you get +1. The next one is, I believe, at 5 million, and the one after that, again, I believe is 15 million. I don't remember 100% on those second and third values, so please forgive me if I'm incorrect. Suffice to say, bonus morale every turn is really good, especially since once you reach whatever population ceiling you have assigned, they start getting unhappy because they want to have children, and you're effectively saying, no, if you had more children, we would need to develop more space, and that would wreck the environment. So having people being happy because your economy is in good shape helps counteract that. And there are other things that can positively or negatively affect morale. So, next turn. And next turn, once again, we should be getting... yes, and we have explored. It has arrived, research has gone over budget. So here's the opposite of what can happen. It went a little over budget, and yeah. And then a second message telling us that the fleet has arrived at the planet. The first one telling us that it arrived. My apologies. The second one telling us that it has explored it, meaning that it is previously was unknown, and now it is known. So here's a new planet. Here's how this works. You can see we've got our tanker here, deceptively saying it's got 4 out of 4 range, except that it actually has much more, and we can see that it's used only this tiny little bit of fuel, constantly refueling itself to get here. So again, tankers have a lot of range, but then again, they're meant to refuel your fleets. So when they only have to refuel themselves, well, they can last a long while. So, the planet, Coacona. First, and arguably most importantly, is the climate hazard. Climate hazard is basically how harsh this planet is compared to the absolute ideal that is your homeworld. You can see our homeworld, when fully developed, has 0 climate hazard and is right in the middle of this little spectrum. Coacona, however, is a little bit off to the right. Sub 100 climate hazard is pretty good, especially early game when you are lacking in advanced terraforming techniques and technologies. Note that a ideal climate hazard is set by the game at random for every species. Not player, species. If there were another Tarka player in this game, their ideal climate hazard would be the same as ours, which means that we would both be going after the same kinds of planets, encouraging competition. If, however, well, not if, we know that the other player is a human, so their preferred climate hazard could be something that is completely unlivable for us. It could be, to us, on this very end or this very end of the spectrum, and thus we wouldn't really be competing for colonies, although, as this is a 1v1 game, we're almost certainly going to be competing anyway. So again, sub 100, very good, especially early on. Size 3, as mentioned before, size is just the overall size of the planet. You can see it's sort of represented. Size 10, size 3. Size is going to determine the maximum population. It is equal to, I believe, 1 billion imperial and civilian citizens for every size category. I believe your homeworld capable of having double that because your homeworld gets some nice little buffs. Resources are, again, overall natural resources, which will determine the maximum industrial output once your planet is terraformed. Infrastructure is, again, overall infrastructure, factories, roads, civilization, effectively, buildings. As we have not even begun to colonize it, it's 0. And cost is the overall cost that per turn that it will take to terraform this planet, given its current climate hazard. So, our current income per turn is projected at 106,000 space bucks, give or take a couple hundred. If we started terraforming Kaukona, it would be reduced to about 94,000, I believe, give or take again. Now, once the climate hazard reaches 0 and the infrastructure is at max, it will no longer give us any cost for terraforming, because the planet will be terraformed, it will be fully built up, it'll be self-sufficient. Your expense for colonies will be here in planetary development. So, since this is so low in climate hazard, and because this has gone over budget, let us just build some colonizers. Now you can see colonizers are pretty expensive, all things considered. But let's build a few of them. Now we know that they have a range of 4. It's 8.2 away. So we're going to need a tanker. Let's start by moving this tanker on to the next planet that we want to get to, and we'll just build another one. And then we'll build some colonizers. Now I don't have any hard facts on this, but I remember hearing once that 8 is sort of the magic number. If anybody knows better than I rather, on whether that's accurate or whether that depends on whether you have certain technologies, please let me know in the comments, because I would really like to find out. And thank you if you're that knowledgeable for considering watching this video. Alright, I believe that's everything, and we shall move on to turn 8. And here we have a random encounter. Now this kind of thing can happen whenever you go to a planet that you haven't explored already. We have an unknown menace, we have our fleet here, 1 destroyer, a tanker, and we have the option to either fight manually, auto-resolve, fight manually if our opponent does, which only really matters against humans, but basically says that if the opponent auto-resolves it, we'll auto-resolve it, and if not, we won't. And we can attempt to peacefully auto-resolve. For now, let's manually resolve, which will also give us a look into the game's tactical combat. We have the alien derelict. So what we're going to do is press Control is no ping. Okay. We're just going to right click all the way over here, double right click actually, to tell our ship to run like the dickens, because the alien derelict, which we can see here, this big old ancient alien ship, and you might notice it has a lot of these weird protrusions that look sort of like maybe guns of some kind, and that's because they are guns, and they would destroy us. They would destroy us really, really easily. Now, thankfully, we, I guess, didn't start within range, and it was not shooting the heck out of us, which means our tanker should escape unharmed. So, let's talk about this interface. We middle click, as we do on the overmap, to center our point of view on an object, be that a planet or a ship. Right click and drag the mouse to move the camera. Left click to select other ships. If I were to left click on an enemy ship, we would be targeting it and firing upon it. Here we have the screen for whatever ship we have selected currently. We have the tanker. We can mouse over individual weapons to see their firing arcs. These are weapon groups, which you can set up when you design a ship. For finer manual control, I believe, I will be perfectly honest with all of you ladies and gentlemen, I have never bothered with this, and as I think we will see, Sword of the Stars is a game that, at least in my experience, doesn't have a huge amount of micro in the space battles, beyond target priority and selection and overall maneuvers. Now we can see here we have our fleet commands: normal stance, retreat from battle, stand off, close to attack, and pursue. And normal will basically make it just go wherever you right click. Stand off will have your ships attempt to maintain a distance with the enemy. They will follow your orders to attack, but they won't actually move exactly where you tell them, instead getting to a set distance from the enemy. Close to attack is basically the same, only instead of standing off at a set distance, they're going to get right up close. And pursue has your units set to follow the enemy. You can also determine your fleet's orientation. For instance, they can be set to face the target, or attempt to orientate themselves to a broadside, and they can also be set to just face whatever heading they're at, irrespective of the target's orientation. Now, over here, we have the same things, and this would let us give different orders to separate ships in our fleet instead of just applying it to the fleet as a whole. We have target area weapon autofire. There are area of effect weapons, and you might not want to use them if your fleet is really close to the enemy, so you can toggle them to not be fired unless you explicitly tell them to. And we want to run away, so we are just going to select retreat from battle. Our ship will now automatically attempt to move towards the map edge, although as you can see we're actually running out of time, so the battle's just going to resolve in a draw anyway. But yes, retreating from battle is how you would retreat your ships. If you're in a fight that you can't win. Yeah, there we go. We entered our hyperspace portal right around the time the match ended. Round draw. And now we can see Alpha Fleet has arrived. 4 ships have been built, our colonizers and tanker. We've still got 4 more colonizers to go. You can see our civilian population is in the red, and that's because some of our civilian population has gone onto the colonizers and left the planet. We have encountered enemy ships. We can click this exclamation point, or sorry, that's not an exclamation point, that is an I for information, and we can see the results of the fleet. We can see the total number of any sort of ship in our and the enemy fleet that were involved, how many of them were lost, how much damage was inflicted by that class of ship overall, and how much was taken. We can see overall weapons damage for all the different weapon types that were used in that battle. So we have our Gauss cannons. We have a slightly different type of Gauss cannon that the alien derelict uses that is different enough to count as its own weapon type. We can also see that the derelict has emitter weaponry, Mason beams, some sort of beam, photonic torpedoes, phaser point defense, which is an endgame tier point defense that is quite good, and phasers. So yeah, it's also classified as a dreadnought in terms of size. So yeah, that thing would have torn us to pieces. But because we actually did the battle, we can see the planet's stats. We can see its climate hazard, which is 370, much higher than the previous one, Caucona. It is size 5, has much less resources, and would cost significantly more per turn to terraform because of its higher climate rating. Climate hazard. Oh, goodness. You can also see we have a little alien derelict right near there to remind us that this is a planet that we don't really want to go to unless we've got something capable of dealing with it. Now, Sword of the Stars, its auto-resolve is a little odd, and I know that occasionally a couple ships that you might not think could do much, set to auto-resolve, can actually clear out an alien derelict. So let's see if we can do that with these extended ranges. It'll take them 6 turns to get there, but we got nothing better to do with them. And we can't really do anything with the planet until it's, been cleared out. So we might as well see if we can get the random number generator auto-resolve to work in our favor. Now, when you retreat from a battle, the fleet just immediately is set to head back wherever it had been going before it went to the battle. So it's currently going back to our homeworld, Kapluum. We can't actually move it, and that's because the Tarkin's way of movement, we would have to research a technology that would let us issue orders to ships in hyperspace instead of only ships that are currently at a planet. In other words, currently our ships don't have radios or whatever sort of space communication device they have that work in hyperspace, only when out of it, such as at a planet. Now, not all races have this luxury. For instance, humans cannot be issued move orders once they've started moving until they actually reach their destination, ever. Which means that if you send a fleet to a planet and that planet gets conquered and there's an enemy fleet there, well, you can't stop your ships from effectively going to their deaths. So that's one of those little things that really separates the different factions in this game and really helps make them unique. Anyway, we also still over budget. Usually it would give us a little message about that, but it didn't. Anyway, so that's about it. We will end turn. Hopefully next turn we'll get that research. Yeah, there we go. So we have ships built. We got 8 colonizers and a tanker, and we're going to send them over to Caucona. You can see here it shows us the range, and then another number in parentheses. So the parentheses is the range of the ships without any refueling, and the number without parentheses is the range given that the tanker is in the fleet. So you can see that the tanker makes this fleet that would normally only be able to, have a range of 4, go out to 10. So that's quite useful. It'll still take 5 turns to arrive, however. Now that our research has completed, it has given us suspended animation, plague, and atmospheric adaptation. Don't those all sound lovely? Well, yes, also you can double click on any of the news icons to sort of go to the screen. So suspended animation would take us 3 turns to complete. We're not in a super hurry now because we've honestly got our first fleet for colonization set up, but we're still going to research it. So if we click, we see that it increases our colonizer's capacity, meaning each colonizer can hold more civilians, meaning more initial population on a planet, so it'll develop faster. This is something that we would add on to our ships, however, so it's not going to affect any ships that currently exist. We're going to start researching it. And we can also see atmospheric adaptation increases population growth rate and terraforming efficiency, which, as you might guess, will determine how fast the planet terraforms down to 0 climate hazard. And we can see here it has a 6% population growth rate bonus, 25% increase in terraform efficiency, and then here, 75-point increase in enviro hazard tolerance. Excuse me, do forgive me. So, what does it mean by that? Well, after a point, a planet can be so hazardous, its climate just so hostile, that your species cannot terraform it. This is different for each individual species, with one of the factions, the Zool, having the highest tolerance for hostile worlds, and the Lear having the... No, not the Lear, I'm sorry, the Morigi having the lowest tolerance. Now, it's still several hundred. It's still, like, I believe 600 at the absolute lowest that it can be. But it matters. So having an extra 75 would mean that if your maximum tolerance was, say, 700 climate hazard, you would then be able to colonize planets that had up to 775 instead. Handy, but not really useful in the early game where you don't want to be colonizing really expensive, high climate hazard planets anyway. That's more useful in the mid-game, where you've got the funding and the time to spare. Anyway, with that, let's also check our finances. You can see that our projected change has increased. That's because our homeworld has been growing with more civilian population. Civilians being the ones that are paying taxes. Apparently, Imperials don't pay taxes, but they're the ones that determine your industrial output. Except also our industrial output has gone up, so I'm not sure. I'm going to be honest. This is one area that I am not super knowledgeable about. Suffice it to say, we have more civilians than we started the game with, because we started the game with about 500 million. We have more, so our income has increased. We also have our current treasury of about 485,000 space bucks, so we're looking pretty good for now. I think we will also, in the interest of exploring more planets, queue up some additional tankers to explore the far reaches of space, and then we'll end the turn. Again, we will split ships. Here you can see that the total range for a single tanker is 64. When you remember that an extended range has a maximum of, what was it, 20? Yeah, it was 20 because they were barely unable to get here. This is what I mean about tankers being much better early game explorers. Although I suppose if you started more centralized with a lot of planets around you, the more limited range of the extended ranges wouldn't be so bad, and would definitely save you some money on those first couple turns. And these guys are going to go a bit far afield. And again, there is little to do but wait right now. Ah, yes. Also, you may notice these little explosions. This says that there was a battle on this planet relatively recently. I believe it lasts for 10 turns or so. It's a bit. And what that means is that the population of the planet, if any, will have a penalty to some parameters, I believe, in regards to population growth, I'm not 100% sure on this. Suffice it to say, if you see these little explosions, it means that there was a battle or event of some kind there. We have also explored another planet. This one's almost 400, size 8, 600, 6,500-ish resources, and as you see, would cost a lot. However, given its large size, large resource base, and the existence of an asteroid belt, this one might be worth keeping an eye on. Now, asteroid belts currently do nothing besides provide some additional terrain in any battles that take place on a planet with them. However, there is a technology that we can get that would drastically increase the amount of resources that a planet has if it has an asteroid belt. It's usually anywhere from like 500 to 1,500, depending on the planet in question. So that's very significant. Anyway, let's move on. Here we go. So this is an example of a planet that we cannot colonize because its climate hazard is just too high. Look at this planet. This is a lava planet. This is the planet that Anakin just takes a lava bath in, and then his skin gets all burned off, and then the Emperor comes and brings him back. You don't want that. Nobody wants this planet. Nobody wants the prequels. So we're going to just leave this planet alone. You see its cost is labeled as prohibitive, which means that it cannot be colonized. Ah yes, and this was an extended range, so it can't really do anything. Now we could either leave it here, where it would provide a small sensor bubble, alerting us to any other fleets or anything that attempt to come to the planet, or we could scuttle it, just scuttle the fleet. This would give a very, very, very tiny amount. I think it's like 1 resource to the planet's resource amount, and also remove that ship from our fleet maintenance. But our fleet maintenance is very minuscule, and honestly having a little bit of radar on our planets is helpful. So we're going to leave it here. Was there anything else? No. As you can see, research has gone over budget again. Yes. So, as I said, let us see if auto-battling does the trick. Alright, our fleet has arrived here. And it did not. And our tanker has returned to our homeworld. Suspended animation was completed, and we can see our battle. So they apparently did nothing, they took a lot of damage, and it was entirely from torpedoes because of how the auto-battle system works, which is weird. So that's going to be a bit of an issue. For now, our colonization fleet has arrived at Kaukona. How you colonize a planet: make sure your fleet is selected, special, colonize, make sure any colonizers that you want are selected. You can clear all, select all, press OK, and they are now in the process of colonizing because they have a house here, because everybody has houses. We will set ourselves a new research. Now, atmospheric adaptation. Even if we put most of our resources into research, it would still take 8 turns. Now, also Plague gives you the Biowar mission section. A bioweapon designed to kill any carbon-based species. Biomissiles, and it's a weapon for clearing out enemy population. We could also potentially go into various technologies, increasing our tactical speed and our strategic range. So, for instance, pulse fission, instead of a range of 4, our ships might have a range of 5 base, or 6. This would also increase it. Pulsed fission drives, as you can actually see here, they are an actual engine section. Recombinant fissionables would be an add-on, much like suspended animation or reflective coating. And then there is the fusion, which would put us into the fusion era, or the mid-game, which is an engine type. As you can see, it takes a whopping 47 turns, 36 if we put every last dollar to it. We could research disruptors, which are a type of torpedo. You can see that any torpedo research would give us the torpedo, assault, and barrage sections. You get plasma cannons. Right now, however, now VRF technology, ballistic rate of fire, this does not require any sort of add-on, which means that if we got this, it would directly impact every single ballistic weapon in all of our ships in our entire empire. No, it does not tell you this, and you can't really know until you've researched the technology and see that, oh, it doesn't require anything. So, again, the game can be very opaque at times. Hyperlink communications. So this would be what would allow us to send movement orders mid-transit. FTL broadband lets you see the combat of allied players, obviously useless in this particular battle, but could be useful in other missions. And battle computers, which basically expands the number of ships that you can have active in combat at any one time, as long as you have one of these squadron command and control ships in play. For now, because this is just a tutorial, I'm thinking, let's get orbital foundries. You can also see that we have over 1 million in savings. You see the number here is green, and if we click +1 for the turn, Imperial savings of 1 million or more. And I think I'm actually, assuming nothing goes wrong, yes. Okay, our colony was established. A fleet arrived, a bit less than 300. Not amazing, but doable. And that's it. So, you can see here we have a new colony. It's got this sort of circle around it and then a little tab, while our homeworld has a star. All of your non-homeworld colonies will have this symbol. So here you see we have a couple extra little things. Terraforming and infrastructure. So, depending on our population, which is 503, we will have a certain amount of points. Here we don't even have a full point, but we have little fractions of points dedicated to either improving the terraforming, which will lower climate hazard, or infrastructure. So currently, we are going to reduce this planet's climate hazard by 0.68 a turn, and increase its infrastructure by 0.25 a turn. We currently have 8.19 because every colony ship comes with a little bit of infrastructure that it gives the planet to represent pre-built habitation modules and similar things. You can see our industrial output is incredibly low because we have very few people and very little infrastructure, and our income is negative because it's not actually producing anything. Now, I find it's helpful early on to focus more on climate hazard, because this will reduce the cost that our planet has. So it'll be cheaper for our bank account. And also because once our climate hazard sort of kicks into gear and starts snowballing, and we get into the double digits of climate hazard reduced per turn, that's where you really start to see a lot of improvement. And ultimately, infrastructure doesn't seem to do that much unless you want to build ships, which I don't really want to do here right now. I don't have any pressing need currently for another shipbuilding world because we're still in the very early game. So with that, We can have it now set to 0.9. And I think that will do it for this video. I hope this has been helpful to people. And if anybody has any comments, any criticism, point out anything I may have been mistaken about, anything really, as long as it's not particularly hateful, please do say it in the comments. I hope you all have a good evening, or morning, or afternoon, or anything at all, really. Any time, any space that you have and are currently occupying. I hope it's good, and I will see you next video.